In this next video, we are going to talk about our first good sampling technique, SRSs. So if convenient sampling and voluntary response sampling from our previous video are not good sampling techniques, then what is a good sampling technique? So sampling technique number 3, and this is really our first good sampling technique, and this is the most basic sampling technique that we can do, and it's called a simple random sample, or you may abbreviate it as an SRS. And on the AP exam, it is acceptable to call a simple random sample an SRS, and you'll commonly refer to a simple random sample as an SRS. Now, the basic definition of a simple random sample is that every group of individuals have the same chance of being selected. So let's say I have 14 people, and I want to randomly select only 3 of them. Or no, 4 of them. Let's go 4, because I already see 4 circles here. So what that means is that if I randomly selected person 1, 4, 11, and 13, okay? And we don't know exactly how this random process is going to work, but just humor me for now, that you understand that we're going to randomly select these people. All right, so persons 1, 4, 11, and 13 have the same chance of being selected as, let's say, 5, 6, 7, and 8, which doesn't quite seem as random, but there is a chance that persons 5, 6, 7, and 8 could be randomly selected, just like persons 1, 4, 11, and 13. So any group of 4, and that was just for sake of this example here, if I wanted to randomly select 4 people, every group of 4 people have the same chance of being selected. Now, what people will get wrong with this sampling technique is that they think that every person has the same chance of being selected, and that would be incorrect. Because if I selected first, let's say person 1, now each person has a slightly better chance of being selected once the first person has been selected. So it's not that they necessarily select one person at a time, it's that they take a group of individuals at a time. So persons 1, 4, 11, and 13 were all kind of grouped together to be randomly selected. Now, by using random chance to select our sample, we will reduce most, not necessarily all, of our bias. So let's actually get into how do we do an SRS. So I'm going to introduce you 3 ways that you can take a simple random sample. And I would say there is commonly a question on the AP Stats exam where they want you to describe how you would take some sort of sample. And it's usually a simple random sample, or it's going to be one of the other ones that we'll talk about in the next video. So the first method is to use an actual physical routine, like drawing names out of a hat. But we want to make sure that everything is equal to ensure equal chances. And what I mean by that is, if we are going to write people's names on slips of paper, we want to ensure that all of those slips of paper are the same size, or roughly the same size. And then if we're going to fold the pieces of paper, we fold the pieces of paper all in the same way so that all the pieces of paper look exactly the same, or almost exactly the same. If we put all the names in a hat, we want to make sure that we stir that hat up to really thoroughly mix them up so that every slip of paper has the same chances of being selected as that group in our simple random sample. Now, the second way is we would use what's called a random number table. And this is in the back of your book, and I'll also give you one in class. We'll use that random number table to select the numbers that are tied to specific people. And so when you see a random number table, and let me bring this up here just so you can get a glimpse. It's kind of hiding behind everything. Let's bring it to the forefront here. There we go. You can see that it has lines, and typically it starts at line 101, and it'll go all the way to, I don't even know, maybe line 150 in our book. I'm not for sure. But these are the random digits that are all in here. And you might go, well, I got some questions. why are they split up the way they are? Why does it start on line 101? Why not just line 1? And why are there different colors? Like, why is there this color in the back and then it goes to this color and then it goes back to that color? I got some questions here. We'll get there. Now, the main things you need to know is that each entry in the table, each number in the table, is equally likely to be any of the 10 digits 0 through 9. And you might look at some of the numbers in this table and really wonder, is that really true? Because there's some instances where, like, you may see 2 9s in a row and 2 zeros in a row. Or really, here's 3 zeros in a row. Like, how random does that seem that we would see 3 of the same number all in a row? And, well, it can happen. It doesn't happen often, right? People win the lottery, and that really doesn't happen that often. So seeing 3 numbers in a row is a rare instance, but it happens in our random number table. Now, the entries, the numbers, are all independent of each other. And that means no knowledge of one part of the table gives no information about any other part. So that just means that the random number table has no memory. That if a 3 comes up randomly, then a 3 still has the same chances of coming up as the next number as any other number does. So here are some of those questions you might be asking yourself. Why are they in groups of 5, right? Because look, we've got 5 numbers. Nope, pen, need my pen. There we go. I need 5 numbers, and then there's 5 numbers, and there's 5 numbers, and there's 5 numbers. Why are they like that? And honestly, it just makes it easier to read when they're split up into smaller groups. Is there a reason why it's 5 and not 4 or 10? Not really. It's just the way that they design the table. Why are the lines numbered 101 to 150? It just makes it easier to read, and to be honest, we're not always going to want to start at line 101, because if we always start at line 101, then these numbers really don't seem that random, right? Always person 1 is going to be the first person picked, and then person 9. So sometimes we may say starting on line, and then we just give some line number, like what about 120? What about 145? We could make the line number really random. And it just makes everything kind of easier to read when everything's in these nice rows and when they're split up into chunks of 5. So here's our third way of taking a simple random sample. We just talked about the HAP method, we talked about a random number table, and number 3, we're going to use technology. So method number 2 with the random number table, that's really like the old school kind of Amish way of doing a simple random sample. But now we're going to use technology to randomly generate our numbers that are tied to people. And so we're going to use our calculators for the most part to do this. But technology really could encompass anything like Excel or just using a random number generator on a website, because I'll often use a random number generator on random.org. So we're going to use the randint function on our calculator. And if you go find the math button on your calculator, on your TI 8384, whatever you have, then you're going to want to slide over to PRB for probability, and you're going to select option number 5, randint. Now, depending on if you have a newer or an older TI calculator, you will either have to know how to use the randint function if you have an older calculator, but a newer calculator will give you a table with options for what exactly it's looking for. So in the randint, there are 3 things that you want. You want to tell the calculator the minimum value possible, and that might be just saying like person 1 is my minimum value, all the way up to your maximum value possible. Like if you had, let's say our instance earlier, we had 14 people, we may say the minimum value possible is 1, the maximum value possible is 14, and then the total number of values that you want. How many random numbers do you want selected between 1 and 14? And so earlier in the example, I said I wanted a random sample of 4. So I might put in randint 1, 14, 4. And that will give me 4 random numbers between 1 and 14. Now, there's a chance that some of those random numbers might be duplicates, and then we'll have to talk about, well, what do we do when we have a duplicate number? Some of the newer calculators have a function, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it's like a rand int no repeat. And basically, it ensures that you will not have repeated digits in your random selection. So why might the AP test, and really more than anything the Chapter 4 test, require that you use a random number table instead, as opposed to the rand int function, and using your calculator and using technology? Well, if I want to make sure that you guys really understand how to randomly take a sample, everybody should get the same random sample if I tell you to use a random number table. If I tell you to all start on a particular line and randomly select so many digits, I can guarantee that everybody will get the same one. And if someone doesn't get the same random digits, then I know that they did the random sample incorrectly. If everybody were to use their calculator or technology to get their random sample, I really don't know if you legitimately figured out how to do this with your calculator, or that you just kind of made numbers up off the top of your head. So the random number table really guarantees that you have successfully randomly taken a sample. So now we need to dive deeper into the HAP method, the random number table method, and the technology method. We need to what's called a scheme. We need to devise a scheme for how we will accomplish our random sample in 3 parts. And so in these 3 parts, I'll talk about the 3 different methods that we just talked about again: the HAP method, the random number table, and technology. So regardless of what method we're going to use, the first part of our scheme is going to be to label the individuals in our population. And so for our HAP method, this could just be writing everybody's name on hopefully equal size pieces of paper. Now, what if your population was rather large? What if you had a population like, let's say our school, for instance, has about 2,000 students? That's a lot of slips of paper. You're going to need a really big hat to put all these pieces of paper in. So what you'll quickly realize is, depending on the population size, some of these methods work better than others. Now, for our technology or the random number table method, this just means assigning numbers to each individual. Okay, so you would just write out, I would assign numbers to all the individuals in my population. And we can't just say, like I say down here, we can't just say we're going to assign numbers. We have to be specific. What numbers are we going to assign? And so remember earlier in our example with just our small population of 14, this might be saying I would assign the numbers 1 to 14 to the population, or to all of the individuals. Now, once we have labeled all of our individuals, now we need to talk about how are we going to pick that first person. So with the HAP method, this step is simply just saying that we're going to mix our papers up, we're going to thoroughly mix them up, and blindly select a piece of paper. With technology, this means that we're going to use our calculator, or you could just say using technology, we're going to use it to randomly generate our first number. And it can be just as simple as that. Using technology, we will randomly generate our first number to represent our first individual selected. Now, the random number table gets a little more difficult. And I'm not going to say it's hard difficult, but we have to state what line of the random number table we're going to use and how many digits that we're going to have to select at a time to represent the first individual. And you might say, what do you mean, how many digits we're going to select? Well, let's use our 14-person population. I have to give each person in that population a 2-digit number technically, because I have double-digit people in my population, right? I have 14 people. I can't just give some people, like say the first person, I can't just call the first person person 1. I would have to call the first person 01. Likewise, the very last person would be person 14, and they would be assigned the number 14. I need them all to have the same number of digits, because I can't just randomly select one number versus 2 numbers. Or let's say I had 500 people in my population. I can't just have some people that are assigned a single-digit number, some people that are assigned double-digit numbers, and some people that are assigned triple-digit numbers. Like, how do I differentiate if I should pick a single-digit person, a double-digit person or a triple-digit person. Everybody has to have the same number of digits. Now, once we select that first person, we need to talk about, well, now what are we going to do? How many more times do we need to repeat this process? And are there certain conditions that we need to watch out for? If you remember, I mentioned earlier, what happens if I were to randomly select with technology and I got the same number twice? Is it really okay that I select the same person twice for a sample? And so those are the types of conditions that we'll need to watch out for. So with our hat method, this just means that we are going to talk about how many names are we going to need to pull out of the hat. And really, will you put the names that you take out of the hat, will you put them back in the hat? Or will you leave those names out of the hat? And you might think, well, that seems weird. But that's called with or without replacement. Is it okay to have a person reselected to be a part of your sample? Or is it not okay? So you need to talk about those things when you're taking names out of the hat. If you just need to say, we're going to take pieces of paper out of the hat without replacement. Or if it's okay to have people repeated, then you need to mention that you're going to put the paper back in before reselecting the next piece of paper. Now, with technology and the random number table, this just means using the whatever function you used in your calculator. And again, you could just keep it very vague and say continuing using technology or just continuing on in your random number table. We just need to talk about how many times we need to do this process before our whole sample is selected, and then really needing to discuss what to do with repeated numbers. So again, you might say ignore repeated numbers or only select unique or different numbers. And so by saying that you want just unique numbers, that means if you happen to come across a repeated value, that you would just redraw, basically. All right, so let's do an example here. So the names of 10 CHS baseball players are given. At practice, every 15 minutes, the coach randomly selects 2 players to run sprints up the hill. Practice is 2 hours long and starts at 3 o'clock. Write a scheme and use the given line 314 to determine who runs at what time. So I have my 10 players here. And so the first part of my scheme is that I needed to label my individuals, right? So part 1, and I might call them players 1 through 10, okay? And if you notice, I'm going to use the random number table here. And you might go, but wouldn't this be easier just to use the hat method with only 10 people? Yes, I would agree. But again, the random number table method is probably what's going to be more in store for you on the AP exam and on the chapter test. So we're going to practice with the random number table. So I'm going to assign the players the numbers 0 through 9. And that way, each person has a single digit number tied to them. Again, if I did 1 through 10, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 are single digit numbers, and then 10 is a double digit number. And again, how do I differentiate if I need to select a single digit number or a double digit number in my random number table? So if I did do 1 through 10, I would have to assign the players numbers 0, 1 through 10 so that every person had a double digit number. But it's going to be easier if I can get away with just using single digit numbers. And I can just use 0 through 9. So then what I'm going to do is select 2 single digit numbers. Why 2 single digit numbers? Because I need to randomly select 2 players to run up the hill. Now, if I just needed to randomly select 1 person to run at a time, then I would only select 1 single digit number. Now, I can't have repeats within the same 15-minute period. It wouldn't make sense to make Joe and Joe run at the same time because Joe is only 1 person. But repeats are allowed in different trials, and we're going to see that happen. Okay, so what I mean by that is maybe Joe is randomly selected to run at 3 o'clock, and then maybe later in practice Joe gets randomly selected to run again at 4:15. And then we're going to continue this process of selecting 2 single-digit numbers until 8 pairs of sprinters have been selected. Now, what we need to do really first here is I never really assigned my players the number 0 through 9. And so how do I exactly assign them the number 0 to 9? And so what I could simply do is just start with Joe and call him person 0. And then Ron, he's 1, Dave's 2, Matt's 3, Brian's 4, Mark 5, Pat 6, Jimmy 7, Adam 8, and Gary 9. But some people might be going, yeah, we could do that, but what if I call Joe 0 and Mark 1 and Ron 2 and Pat 3? What if I labeled them this way? That works as well. Will you get the same pairs of runners for all 8 instances if you label them differently? And no, you won't get the same pairs. So does it really matter how you label them? I mean, could you even go crazy and go, I'm going to call Ron 0 and Adam 1 and Mark 2? Sure, you could really mix it up if you want to. But my recommendation is just keep it simple. Just start at the beginning and go in rows until you've completely labeled everybody. Okay, so I'm going to do, again, the simple method. We're going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across the top row. 0 through 4. And then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for the last 5 players. All right, so let's do this. Select 2 single digits. So my first 2 single digits are 3 and 5. So that means Matt is going to be running with Mark. And then we need the next 2 pair of digits. So the next 2 numbers, 4 and 7. So let's see. Brian, let's do this. There we go. Brian and then Jimmy are going to be running. And then if I select the next 2 digits. Now, I'm going to take this 6, but since everything is split up into groups of 5, then I need to take my next number from my next group of 5. But notice I've got a repeat in the same trial. I'm not going to have Pat and Pat run. It's not like I'm going to rip Pat into 2 halves and make half of Pat run and make the other half of Pat run. So I got to skip that second 6, and then we're really going to go take a 5. So Pat and Mark are going to run in the third one. Poor Mark, this is already his second time running, but hey, this randomly happened to happen. Now, the next sequence of 2 numbers would be person 9 and person 7, Gary and Jimmy. Who's up next? Person 2 and person 3, which would be Dave and Matt. Next up, person 9, person 4, Gary again. He only got a 30-minute break, but that's the way it works, Gary. Gary and Brian. And then next up, person 2, person 1. So Dave and Ron. And last but not least, the last sprinters are persons 6 and 5. Oh my gosh, why can't I click this silly button? Pat and Mark. You might notice it doesn't really seem very random that Pat and Mark were selected exactly twice in this, and in that order, Pat and Mark. But again, this is just what can randomly happen in these cases here. Now, did anybody not get selected? You might go, yeah, Joe got by the entire practice without having to run. Well, that doesn't seem fair, but that's what randomly happened. So you just have to take the random number table at its word that it really is random. Now, the last example, and this is one I want you to try out. The principal has a list of 50 students who completed a recent SAT prep course, and he needs to select an SRS of 10 students to receive a prize. The principal has asked you to write a scheme for how he should randomly select the winners. So again, I've given you 3 different methods for how to randomly select students, and you may use any of those 3 ways. Now, to be honest with you, I would maybe go for the easier option, which would be the hat method. But if you want to practice, you could do the technology method. You could talk about the random number table method. Or if you really want really good practice, you could write me a scheme for all 3 methods. But I'm really looking just for one, and we'll talk about it the next day in class. Good luck.